Greetings, friends, and welcome to another exciting prop build. This time, we're building a lantern. It's in the lines of a Gothic style lantern. Have a little bit of fun. Regardless, it should be an illuminating experience. I'll see myself out. First of all, down below, you'll find this template, and it's all of the pieces you're going to need to build this monstrosity, lantern. Building it all out of EVA foam, and these are just exercise mats, 3/8 inch, and this is, I got almost all the pieces you need out of a single mat. The only other thing you're going to need is this type of foam, which is the white packing foam. You've probably seen this in packages you bought. If you ever do, save it, because I don't know the name of this specifically, like what kind of foam it is. I just know that it's semi-transparent, like you can actually see my hand through it. Works really good for what we need it for in this build. So right into it. I don't want to delay too much. In the template, you're going to want to stick this together. You cut across those crop lines using tape to hold this together. This becomes the template for the shroud. Now I'm going to quickly go over here, pull apart my lantern as it is. Now that's going to become the shroud. This glue is obviously very yellow. Don't worry, it gets hidden for the most part. You're going to be cutting this template out of this using contact cement to bind it. You're going to build that, and you're going to put it aside and not think about it for at least 10 minutes. The next thing you're going to need is 8 of these. This is all listed on the template, so I'm not going to be too specific on it. You're going to need 8 of these, and depending on the finish you want to go for, you have to go modify this with a Dremel. I'm going to go outside, and I'm going to actually Dremel all these down to get rid of this texture here and get it all ready to be assembled, because there's some little stuff we're doing with electronics and the such. Then the final thing you're going to need is this template here. There's 2 of them. There's the top and the bottom. And this is going to be the same thing. You don't need, you could Dremel just this little edge on these ones. And this one you need to Dremel this whole upper area to about, to the point that the shroud hits it. So, you know, you can probably much do the tabs and you'd be safe. You can age this up at this point a little or as much as you want. But pay attention, there's going to be marks on my template that shows where this is. You don't want to Dremel that because you want it to fit snugly. So you'll see that on the template when you download it and how to go about this. Things you learn as you go along. It's never just a cut and dry. Now the final part that we're going to actually build and cut out that needs a little bit more explanation is this part. This here is a saw wind level screw up. As you can see, all of my chamfers are the wrong way. Yeah, and my glue, the seal on it popped, so all of my rubber cement was pretty much garbage, which means all of that cutting is now garbage as well. And what I did is on my foam is I laid it all out, wrong way, there we go. Laid it all out in a line, and the reason is you want to make sure that when you cut this vertical, that they're all roughly the same size. And if it's all set up like that, you can actually cut them and they'll all end up the same height, which is really important, especially on this because you're gluing them all together. And then once you've got that, there's a couple chamfers you need to pay attention to. Here, the top and the bottom of this are chamfered at about a 22.5-degree angle. And what that does is once these things are all glued together, it allows it to sit at a slight angle so you have really good contact for the glue. Same with this one. Now, the sides here are also cut at about a 25-degree angle both ways to the inside. And once again, that just makes it so when you put these things together, that they will fit. If you're not perfect at cutting these angles and you're worried about screwing them up, just practice a couple times. Visualize where that angle is, and over time, you'll get really good at hitting these angles to get them right. And when you do work with EVA foam, being able to smack angles is a skill that you will not regret to do. And you know, it's more of a muscle memory. As time goes along, you'll just get into a pattern where you go, yeah, it feels about right. My knife is getting dull. But you can see how that's about a 25, and then you can get really aggressive and you can go, oh, this is a little bit risky. And then you can go deeper and you end up with like a 45-degree angle. Practice. Now, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do some weathering on these, and I'm going to be gluing these. These are just done with contact cement or rubber cement or whatever the heck you happen to call it in your part of the world. I've always called it contact cement. I guess it just varies. I'll be back. Now, we're getting to the point where you're going to go through and using a Dremel with a sanding drum on, sorry about that, you get to do a whole bunch of sanding. Wear protective stuff on this. This stuff can be nasty. Now, all I did is, once I had this done, you'll see on the template, there's little marks showing, look at that, I actually clipped it a tiny bit. I wasn't supposed to do that. Marks these, and what they do is it tells you where you don't want to sand off, because what it does is it makes sure that it has really good friction for fitting into there. You can glue this after, but I like the idea of the friction doing most of the work here. And then all I did is I used the front end of the drum to rough up the surface. Did the same thing on all of the sides except for those, and then I did a little bit here on the front surfaces all the way through. You have to do that 8 times. You don't have to do the back, which is good. You can if you want, but you don't really see it, so it's not really important. Now the rest of it, you'll see that now that we've got this all assembled, glued together with the contact cement, I just went through and I did a bit of work, and as you can see, that contact cement, those seams all but disappear, especially when you sand them a bit. Then you rough up that. Don't be too angry on this, because you can cause yourself some of your own problems. Now up on the top, you want the smooth side up. And before I forget, you see that I sanded off all of the texture. If you're using EVA foam mats, do that first, but don't get over the top. You'll still have a bit texture left. Look at that, I grabbed the one that I say, oh look, be careful, don't get rid of it all, but you know what, I did a pretty good job there. So you're just going to go through, rough it up a bit, and you can test it as you assemble it to see how things go together, to make sure that you have the surface all done to the edge. And in reality, I'm going to go back through and I'm going to do a bit more here, just so if you look in, it'll look like it's just as rough everything else. Now, the reason why I'm not leaving that open is because the light bulb attaches and I need a lot of strength there. So the whole trick now is just to go through, so you can do that. Don't have to worry about doing the middle there. Once again, do the bottom. Don't have to worry about the middle. I'm sounding like a broken record. Grab all the other pieces that you need. Stick them on. Check your positioning. See how they look. Now, you'll be wanting to glue. Oh, it's bouncing around on me. See, I got a little bit more left to go there. Even if I missed it, it's not a big deal. This one's going to be glued on, but this one's going to be glued onto here, but this is going to be free, because we're going to be cutting a hole in the base of this to allow for the battery to go up into there. And this is going to be what you take off to make it all work. And it's going to be a friction fit opening on it. So I'll go over that just before we're all done, of course. Now, using a bit of brown spray paint, I hit the top and the bottom of this and a little bit around the edges, like in the middles. Be very careful. You want this to be as transparent as possible still, because you're going to want to have the light through, but you don't want it to look perfectly clean. So you can do a bit this. I might go in and put a bit of yellow on this to make it look equally as good off as it does on, which I always find very important. So anyways, do the top again. And now this here, I'm doing this because I had this hook sitting around. You can do this hook out of EVA foam as well. There's not a lot of weight on this, so an EVA foam hook will work just fine. I did it because I had it around. You don't have to. On the template, there's going to be an EVA hook for this, so you can follow through. I just want to see what happens if I put this on and if it would work well. And it did. Anyways, I'm going to go through now using my heat gun. I'm going to very gently seal all of this foam, so it just ends up that little bit smoother, so when I paint it, it has a more of a metal texture to it. I'll be back once it's all painted, and we'll talk about how we're doing the final friction fit of this bottom part here for the battery, and we'll talk about the wiring. See you in a few. Now we go into final assembly here, and all you're pretty much doing is taking contact cement and gluing these pieces together. If you've got like this surface here, make sure you rough it up a little bit with a sander before you glue it, because it really doesn't like to stick. So everything's labeled. So the one octagon on the bottom goes there. Now on the upper part here, you'll see that the upper octagon's here, and I just put a hole through it, And then I put a second hole through this one to allow for the bolt, for this to have something to grab onto. And it's going to be almost impossible to see. But there's another one right there to hide the bottom side of the bolt. That one's not necessary. I'm just a completionist. I don't want to see the bolt. Now up here, you'll see the last one hiding in there. And all that is I took a hex and I rounded out the edges of it. And that hides the top of this bulb here. So once you've got all there, we go like this way. There we go. Hides the top of this bulb. Now the wiring. This is pretty straightforward, but I'll just go over it very quickly. All you're doing is you're taking the wire from, let's bring this around. There we go. So you can see all the wiring here. So you'll take the red lead directly from the bulb out to the first part of your switch, whatever switch you use. I use just a standard click switch because I could hide it really well right there. And you see it works. It's actually working, see? And then all you do is you come out. I did it on the positive. I brought the red in, red out. Brought it down to my 9-volt lithium cell. This is a little bit low. I'm going to have to get some higher milliamp hour batteries because these only last, for some reason, about an hour before they kick these off. I need a bit of a bigger battery. Then feed it through red to red, black to black. Because this is a lithium cell, normally I wouldn't cover that up with like shrink tape. Or if I could find my electrician's tape, I would use that. But I don't want to screw around with backfeeding lithium battery. Really bad things can happen. I don't know what prevention there is in there. So once you've got all that part built, I'm going to quickly go over what I did on the bottom here, which I just realized I told you to glue it. You don't. You do glue it, but you don't. Good God. So here, this part here is removable. And this part gets glued on. And then here, you'll see that I cut out, very roughly, a shape. Did the whole jack-o'-lantern thing. I put a notch in it. So when this thing goes back on, it allows you to line that up and just push that back into place. And what that makes sure is you can replace that battery when it's inside without taking apart your whole lamp. Now, once you've got all of the arms on your lamp base here, you'll see that these aren't falling out. What I did here is I used a pin, just a standard sewing pin, pushed it through. This one's particularly, there we go, here. All you can see is the pin head because I pushed it through, and what it does is it turns this into a hinge. And the whole point of that is I don't want to glue this top part onto the bottom because if this lamp ever breaks, you have to rip apart your creation to get it fixed. This way, everything hinges, and then you get to the point you can just reassemble it regardless of what happens to it. Now, the shroud here, all I've done is, of course, the brown at the top and the brown at the bottom, and then I did a little bit of yellow ochre as a coloring on it because I want this to look good even when the lamp is off. So now I just drop that into place. You don't have to glue it in. You could if you really wanted to, but I'm not because I don't think it's needed. Then you take your whole battery function. This goes in. And there we go. It comes down, and then when these arms go into place, the friction will hold it all together, which is kind of cool. But I'm going to suggest that if you do this, take an additional pin and drive one through here and then one through kind of the opposite. That way, you know, it just gives it that little extra safety. And when you take it apart, just make sure you pull out that pin that if you ever need to. Or in reality, you could do all these pinned. So when I spray painted this, I took out this center thing and I put a plastic bag over my electronics. It's actually right there. I can barely see that it's black because of the way the camera's looking. And then I just spray painted this whole thing together while covering my switch so it didn't get any paint in it. And then I just spray painted it all assembled, making sure to get all of the spots on it that I can. How did I know why, because I didn't rewind all that wire. Seeing I got a little bit of heat shrink kicking around up there. It shows you what happens when I do this. Now, I'm going to go through and dry brush this with silver to finish it up. And then we'll be back to talk about whatever I decide else on it. But as you can see, the lantern's looking pretty darn slick already, and the effect of, you know, a completely self-contained item and then turning it on, pretty slick. Anyway, back in a few. finished. Went through, did a tiny bit of silver dry brushing on the whole thing to get it all finished up nicely. You don't have to go crazy on it. And then I just got my dollar store chain, hooked it up so it hangs off of my knee brace, which I should do a video about those later. Regardless, that is the whole lantern completely finished. And as you can see, it has such an amazing look and feel to it. And once this thing gets, you get a little bit of wind on it if it's outside, it has such an authentic look that this can fit into a lot of different types of designs and decor. Regardless, thank you very much for hanging out. I appreciate it as always. If you liked the video, please hit like. It helps load in terms of pushing this out on the logarithm. And a subscribe would also be greatly appreciated. A special thanks to my patrons who help me each month buy all the materials, like the $18 can of spray paint for this thing this time. Inflation. Regardless, thanks for hanging out, everybody, and have a good one.